Good morning, friends. I hope this video finds you doing well and healthy in the midst of some very unusual and difficult days, not only in our state and in our country, but really around the world. It's a beautiful Sunday morning, and for most of us, our lives have been marked by rolling out of bed and rolling to church, where we would gather together corporately to worship together. And yet, in these days, that's not possible. And so my hope and my prayer is that these short little video devotionals will continue to encourage your soul and to refresh you as we move forward together. Recently, I was reading the story of the prophet Elijah in 1 Kings chapter 19. Maybe you're familiar with it, maybe you're not. Let me give you the Cliff Notes version of the story. You have this prophet Elijah that's been sent by God to do incredible things, and he has, all the way up until chapter 19 in 1 Kings. But when you get to chapter 19, you encounter a prophet who's incredibly dejected, he's depressed, he's discouraged, and he's afraid. He's on the run. He's afraid of those that are seeking to take his life. And it says that he flees to Beersheba, where he sits down under a tree and he literally laments his very life. He asks God that God would basically take his life. He's hopeless. He sees no point in continuing to live. But as the story goes on, we read not only does God provide for his physical need and give him food and water to replenish his body, but it says that God also speaks to him. Now, here's the crazy part of this story is that God instructs Elijah to leave this little cave that he's hiding out in and to go stand out on the mountain in front of him. Now, let's pause here and put our own commentary into the story. If this was you and God told you to go stand out on the mountain, that he was going to speak to you, what would be going through your mind in that moment? How would you anticipate that God is going to communicate with you in that moment? Perhaps it would be a big lightning bolt or some sort of miraculous rainbow or some massive earthquake that would just shake the ground under your feet. But it would be something big, something grandiose, something miraculous perhaps. Now go back to our story. And it says that first there was this mighty wind that came, but God was not in that wind. And then it says that there was this earthquake that rattled the mountain, and yet God was also not in that earthquake. And then finally there came fire. Surely God's in the fire. God was also not in the fire. And then came what it says is a still small voice of God. And that was how God communicated to Elijah in that moment. You know, this story is an incredible reminder that God is always at work, both in big and small ways, but too often, especially maybe in days like we're living in now, we're expecting the big miracle, right? Splitting of the Red Sea, the falling of fire from heaven that would burn up the false prophets, maybe the blind man to be healed instantly. But we want God to wow us. We expect the big miracle. But it turns out that that's not what we get most of the time, is it? Rather, we get the whispers of God reminding us that he is with us and that he is working on our behalf. I wonder if we're missing today the small daily blessings and the small miracles of God because we're holding out for the big one. Could it be that in the midst of all the chaos of the world that we're living through at the moment, that God is systematically accomplishing his will in a billion different ways that we sometimes miss as we look for the big miracle? Let me encourage you today to go out and to stand on the mountain and to be still in the presence of the Lord and to listen for his still small voice. He's at work in your life and he loves you deeply. Have a great Sunday. Stay safe, be healthy, and we'll talk to you again soon.